I cannot put my own theme music in here. So here I am, rocking like a hurricane. No, what the fuck am I doing? Oh god, here I am, rocking. No, I need to get back. I need to switch to this. Oh, I just realized my background isn't lit. Ah, let's light it up. There we go. There we go. Okay, that's all better. It's all better. Now, just gonna wait a little bit because I won't start this until it's exactly 12. And now we're here. So the time has come, Wason. Welcome back. Okay, it just started too. You made it just in time. But I won't start the actual thing until it's actually 12 on my clock. So yeah. So anyway, how you been? Yeah. Yeah, so it's about almost 12. Oh god. I'm excited. Oh yes, you all been. Yes, you guys are all back. You know, guys, I'm also excited. Not because been fine. I've been missing some stuff on the local game convention, but it's all good. Damn, wish I could go to conventions. I can't even afford to go to conventions. Like it sucks. Like that I can't afford to do that. Well, anyway, I'm very excited, guys. This chapter. Oh god. Well, anyway, guys, that's how should I start the intro off. Hello, kings, queens, nerds, and geeks. Powder Milk here, and welcome back to Fallout Equestria. Now, guys, this is the final episode of Fallout Equestria. For those of you who already know, you can already tell by the freaking title, and it's going to involve Chapter 45, Afterward, and the epilogue, then the afterward. And I am both dreading and hoping to see the ending. Hoping to see the ending. It was a small, local one. There are usually more than 100 people, most board games and roleplay. Oh, okay. Anyway, I'm really hoping to see the ending because I want closure of what's happening, but I also don't want to see it because it means the story is over, and then I won't know what to do with my life. I'll probably just make more videos, but you know what I mean. Like that feeling you get when you finish something and you don't know what to do with your life. Like you finish a book series, and you're like, what now? And, well, Chapter 45 is called, well, yeah, there's always Project Horizons. Chapter 45, it's called The Virtue of Little Pip. We're going to learn something about Pip today. We already know what her cue mark truly means. It's not just she goes, oh, sorry. Oh, I actually had to get up to do this. I bet Project Horizons is 3 times as long. That means it's going to take me about 3 times as long to finish the series. Come on, it took me a year to finish this one. Well, anyway. We already know what Little Pip's kitty mark means. Which means she's not good. It's not that she's a good pip buck technician. She's good at finding people. That's what it means. Is what we found out. And we found out that she's the spark for the elements of the harmony now, which is a lot to take in now that I think about it. And yeah. Hold on. I gotta grab something. Ease my throat. Do this. Every time I record, my throat hurts. It always happens. And always gotta have me something to drink. Probably not good for my kidneys, but why not? Now, moment truth. It's time to start it. 3, 2, 1.
Sacrifice. The wasteland will try to tear you down, make you a monster, or strip you of all of your will to fight. The wasteland, and to a lesser degree, life itself. Every day is a struggle against the forces that attempt to compromise and erode anything good in your heart. It helps to have a cause, a purpose, but I've seen too many who have put their faith in those alone have been led grievously astray. Every pony has a virtue, whether they realize it or not, and it is your virtue and your friends together that form your greatest defense. Raiders are those who failed to weather the moral ravages of the wasteland. Velvet Remedy was wrong. They do have a reason for existing. The wasteland is the cause of their effect. I had finally discovered my virtue. I should have realized it when I first looked into the mirror of my soul. Instead, I was too blinded by what I saw, a blood-coated and dying raider, to recognize what the mirror was actually showing me. The first time I truly acted in the spirit of sacrifice. The time when, even though I stood no chance of survival, I placed myself between a helpless caravan and what I believed to be a Pegasus raider intent on slaughtering them. That raider had been Calamity, and that act had initiated the first and closest friendship I have ever known. I should have recognized the truth in the mirror, but it took Pinkie Pie.
I'm sorry, I'm just imagining, like, if this was, like, so out of context, like, if someone was listening to this out of context, to be like, hey, you just shot me, let's be friends.
Help me see how to see.
You're just looking at it wrong,
she told me, pointing to the mirror, but not to me, pointing instead to the approaching caravan and the family I was giving my life to protect.
Look behind you.
My virtue is sacrifice. I believe in Pinkie Pie, in sunshine and rainbows, but of all the ministry mares, I think it has been Rarity, not Pinkie Pie, that I felt the greatest connection to. The mare whose last act was to save her dearest friend, who tore apart her own soul for those she loved. My feelings are not surprising, for sacrifice and generosity are closely tied. But generosity is a much grander virtue with a much wider scope. I am not generous. I've never given anything but myself, and upon my reflection, my sacrifice was often selfish, a vehicle to protect those I love from facing harm, even when it was their right to do so. My mistakes in Philadelphia are perhaps the most brutal example. After my final discourse with Red Eye, I began to realize that I had been like an overprotective mother, stifling the growth of those I loved. Only now was I finally learning to let it go. And still, it was the hardest and most painful thing for me to do. Sending my friends into battle against the Enclave without me, putting Ditsudu, the spirit of laughter and one of the most beautiful souls in the equestrian wasteland, on the front lines. It tore my heart out to not merely allow others to sacrifice, but to ask them to. No, I was not truly generous. I wasn't Rarity, not even Red Eye. Nor was I truly Apple Snack. But sacrifice lies in that space between generosity and perseverance, between the desire to give so that others don't have to, and the drive to never give up, no matter the danger and no matter the cost. I cannot give enough thanks for my friends. They guided me, protected me, and allowed my virtue to blossom into something that just might, in a small way, help save Equestria itself. Without my friends, virtues can become corrupted, metamorphosizing into dark and twisted shadows of themselves. This is a truth I have both seen in others and felt in myself. Without the fortifying strength of friendship, sacrifice becomes self-destructive, the sort of false nobility that drove me to blindly leave Stable 2, even though part of me believed all I would find beyond the door was oblivion. I quiver to think what I would have become, and what would have become of me, had I not met Calamity when and how I did. Without the camaraderie of friendship to light the way, it was so easy to get lost. I have observed this, and I have witnessed so much worse. Monterey Jack committed suicide. That was not the virtue of sacrifice at play, not even a corrupted manifestation of it, but rather the utterly selfish absolute lack of it. Monterey Jack had abandoned everything, even his children, because he no longer had the ability to make even the most simple of sacrifices: living. Selfishness tells us that it is more important for us to have, and to get, and to not suffer, than it is for anyone else. Just by merit of our experience being ours, and everyone else's not so. Generosity is not immune to those impulses, but an ability to act counter to them, to give to others at the cost of not having for yourself. Sacrifice demands you put at risk that which you hold precious, to do so even when another might be willing to instead, especially then, so that no other has to. I face the fire, not for my own sake, but for the chance to save lives, to remove the cause to the war's effect, and to give the ponies across the equestrian wasteland something precious, something vital which had been stolen from them. I hoped that I was helping give them all a better world, and yet, at the same time, I couldn't help but wonder if it was a world I would have any place in. The mirror had shown me my virtue, but I had not seen it, distracted by the image of what I had become. All the lives I have saved can't wash the blood off my hooves, or stop the nightmares born from all the horrors I've witnessed. When the overmare had invited me back to Stable 2, I walked away. I knew the truth. That day I truly tasted the virtue of sacrifice, and recognized it for what it was. But I don't think I truly understood sacrifice until today. The day I died. I died. I remember the first time I saw Velvet Remedy. The couple living across the hall from my mother and me had gone to the stable's best young talent show in the atrium. They'd left their little colt with the babysitter. According to the babysitter, she'd only turned her tail for a few moments, but in those seconds, the colt had slipped into the bathtub, hit his head, and drowned. She called for emergency help. The clinic was only a few halls away, adjacent to the atrium, and the medical ponies made the gallop in under a minute. Half the stables seemed to arrive in 4, including Velvet Remedy, who had been singing when the news broke. She'd cut her song, rushing along with the parents and the gawkers to see if the colt was going to be saved. The colt managed to be revived. Mother said, repeatedly and to any pony who would listen, that the colt had been clinically dead for over 2 minutes. I remember thinking how beautiful Velvet Remedy looked as she tried to follow the medical ponies taking the colt back to the clinic, and was directed away. To think, the crush that set all of this into motion had started that evening. I died. I came back. Faith doesn't require you to be willingly blind or dogmatically stupid. I knew as I faced the fire that it was going to be more painful than anything I'd suffered before, and I was almost certainly going to die. But I also knew there was a chance, if only just a chance, that death might be survivable. And Pinkie Pie had promised me sunshine and rainbows. Faith does require that you take risks. Sometimes
Indeed.
you have to risk everything. Rarity had tried to burn the book, she insisted to Applejack after...
God, all this talk about sacrifice is making me think of my father. All he's done for me as a child, as I'd done as a child. I grew up poor and everything, and I Thank you, Dad. If you watch this, you probably won't. Because knowing you don't watch all my damn videos. You only watch the important ones. My Dad, if you ever do watch this, I want to thank you so much for all the sacrifices you made. Sorry.
After the other mayor had called her on still having the black book. She had tried, even tried having Spike burn it, but all that accomplished was sending the book to Princess Celestia. The black book. A soul jar bound with a living soul. If it could survive the trip, soul intact, there had to be a chance, if just a chance, that so could I. Returning from death by incineration was, admittedly, more severe than coming back from drowning, and a whole league beyond regrowing a leg. I came back. Didn't I? Everything was darkness, like the nothingness I had once feared was outside the door of my stable home. The darkness was cold. I wasn't in pain, but I could feel myself breathe, feel the beat of my heart, the press of my clothing, and the weight of my saddlebags on my back. I also felt cold, polished rock beneath my hooves. The room around me rushed into being the second I realized my eyes were closed, and in doing so, instinctively opened them. I swayed, hit with a tsunami of intense relief that left me feeling strangely euphoric, and more than a little foolish. I was in what I guessed to be a reception room. I chose to assume I was in the central hub of the Single Pegasus project. If this was heaven, it left a lot to be desired. If it was hell, well, then hell was pretty lame. I was in a sizable circular room with cool azure walls visible between cloud-white columns rising from
You know, reading this, I'm starting to think they have a concept of heaven or hell. That or it was made up over time. I don't know what to believe. But this gives me the idea that there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more to Equestria's religion. Excuse me. And, I'm kind of curious. What do they believe? I know they believe that in the goddesses, which is Celestia and Luna. But what do they actually believe? Like, before then, what did they believe? Did they believe in an afterlife, or did they believe in science? And is the afterlife created over time? Was the afterlife created over time? Because the princesses were dead. So there must be a place of what's causing everything.
mist-colored marble floor. Above me, clouds floated in patterns beneath a dome of hazy slate blue. The walls were covered in painted snowflakes, each with a beautiful clear gemstone set in the center. A shower of diamonds. There were railings, counters, and carved marble furniture, all covered with a glistening sheen of frost. The room was chilly, but not freezing. The frost itself was enchanted, radiating the cold that filled the chamber. The frost had slowly spread to cover much of the columns and patches of both the walls and the ceiling. In another 50 years, the entire room might have been covered. There were 2 exits. Behind me, a set of gabled silver double doors which matched the ones I had seen on the exterior of the central hub while I was banging on the shield. Opposite those grander doors was a single, small, unassuming door which must have led further inside. A lattice work of metal and icicles arched between the 2 pillars between myself and the smaller door. 3 huge monitors, each nearly the size of a pony, were mounted on the lattice work, their screens a dull, dead gray. A nearly identical lattice work arched between the 2 pillars nearest the set of double doors. The icicles formed words between arching bands of silver. Winter vestibule. But my little pony protested irrationally. It's summer. Against a far wall, I spotted a few empty wall vendors and a sunrise sarsaparilla machine. A bottle of sarsaparilla stood on the arm of one of the chairs, next to me, inches from the bones of a forehoof. The magical coating of frost on the chair had turned the liquid contents ice cold. All about me, collapsed on the furniture or scattered about the floor, were the skeletons of ponies. Those on the floor formed small islands of bone in the mist, maybe a dozen in all. I trod carefully. If my suspicions were correct, one of these skeletons might be the former body of the goddess Celestia. I winced as my hoof came down on the metal clamp of a clipboard. Looking down, I was struck by nostalgic memories of Calamity and Steelhooves joking about Stubbornite. A small smile played across my muzzle before I refocused my attention. Spike had, to my knowledge, never sent anything to any pony other than Princess Celestia. I had only my faith in Pinkie Pie's words that, this time, his fire would take me where I needed to be in order to bring sunshine and rainbows back to Equestria. I could not deny that the reason it might do so is because that location and Celestia's final resting place might be one and the same. The shield around the SPP was designed to let either of the princesses through, and I had never found her bones in Canterlot. It seemed to me as if she had died with her sister, then Nightseer would have probably been wearing both. Although, perhaps not. Perhaps, as the Alicorn's name suggested,
Yeah, it is true that I didn't see Celestia's bones. I entirely forgot about that, and I didn't think about that. I know it sends things to Celestia. I don't know why I didn't think about that. I didn't think it actually directly sent it to Celestia. I just thought it sent it to her castle. That's what I always assumed. And I was wrong. Now I know that it actually directly sends it to her. This means something. It means it's directly to Celeste. I'm going to call her Celeste for now, because Celestia is a mouthful. Now, but it means if they find the bones, I'm probably going to cry. If we find Celestia's bones, I'm going to cry.
she had a particular affinity for the Princess of the Night and the Moon. Near the silver doors was the corpse of a mare. Not a skeleton like the others, but an intact body, her eyes opened wide, staring at nothing. The winter vestibule was not cold enough to freeze the body, but the chill was enough to dramatically slow decomposition. Still, I suspected she had not been here for more than a few weeks, and it disturbed me deeply that I had become enough of a connoisseur of death and dead bodies that I felt I could make such an estimation. There were no marks, no wounds or signs of trauma. Like me, she was not burned. She was just dead, her eyes wide open as if in mortal terror. Had she, my mind conjectured, died of shock? When I faced the burning death of a dragon's fire, I had been hoping for this. I had no doubt that, for her, it had been completely unexpected. As I reached out a hoof, gently closing her eyes, I wondered what her last thought had been. My hoof froze an inch from her face, as it struck me that I might know those eyes. Though weeks of slow decay had rendered—
Yes, I remember! I know who it is! It's the fucking, it's one of the Enclave members who got stuck, who was burned alive in their armor by Spike. And, it was very, very, disturbing, but yeah, I remember who it is. I know who it is. I don't know if little Pip knows who it is yet, so.
rendered them strange. They could have been the eyes of that one Enclave mare, one of the intruders into the dragon's cave, that Spike had slain. I didn't understand. Why was she here? And if she was, then why wasn't the room full of propeller parts and everything else consumed by Spike's breath? I stared at the decomposing body of the mare in confused dismay. I had faced the fire of a dragon, based on faith, thin evidence, and a cripplingly desperate lack of options. If she was sent here the same way, then something must have made her different, just as something had made me different. But she wasn't guided by a precognitive voice of the past. She wasn't a Lightbringer. She wasn't even a message. But then, in a twisted way, wasn't she? Spike had certainly been trying to send a message to the Enclave. A dull pain began to thud in my mind as I thought about it. Did forces such as destiny, purpose, and intention play a part in dragon magic? If so, then it was not in the way ponies conceived of such things. Maybe they mattered in a more mysterious and nebulous existential way. I doubt Spike intended to send this mare anywhere, any more than he had planned to send the Black Book. I felt a sudden weakness in my knees as I glimpsed the breadth of my lack of understanding. I felt suddenly like I had taken my leap of faith without even grasping the idea of gravity.
No shit.
The chill of the room began to seep in as I stood over the Enclave mare, deep in thought. I recalled part of a tale Spike had told us. How a hiccup had sent a bundle of scrolls tumbling down on Celestia's head. It was an accident, but they were scrolls. Their purpose was to bear messages. The Black Book itself desired for its influence to be spread. Or maybe this dead mare wasn't who I believed she was, and I was just spinning nonsensical wheels in my head.
How does she get in and out?
I had asked Lionheart, looking at a pink warped glass ball which had once, centuries before, been designed to hold a small pet. Dragon magic. I winced, an unpleasant ache in the back of my brain. Dragon magic. One more thing to add to the list of stuff that makes my head hurt. Right up there between Enclave politics and rock farming. But still below pony-pulled train engines. I finished closing the mare's eyelids down over her staring, lifeless eyes. Then, shuddering slightly from more than just the cold, I rotated about and started towards the small door. Even from across the room, I could see I was in trouble. The door had a cloud lock. If it was locked, and when was anything ever easy, then I couldn't open it. The cloud walking which had allowed me to make it this far wouldn't affect either my tools or my telekinesis, neither of which would interact with the clouds. My trot dropped to a slow walk, as I began to realize that I had come all this way, asked for so much from so many, and I might be stuck here forever in this cold, tacky room. The 3 screens erupted in life. Above me, glaring with an expression of cold and evil rage, was an ebony alicorn. Her vast black wings filled the screens from left to right. On the center monitor, her turquoise dragon-like eyes stared down at me with utter contempt from behind a helmet forged of bluish metal.
You trespass in the sanctum of Nightmare Moon,
she said icily.
I give you this one chance to leave, as swift as your little pony hooves can carry you.
I backpedaled in shock, my hoof stepping onto the ribcage of a skeletal pony, causing me to trip and somersault backwards, coming to rest awkwardly against the rotting corpse of the unknown Pegasus. Nightmare Moon. Or, I quickly suspected, a security system designed to emulate her. Rainbow Dash had formed the Shadow Bolts. It made sense that she might have drawn on similar iconography when designing the internal security of her ministry's greatest project. I planted my hooves firmly on the cool floor, and glared back at the screens full of Nightmare Moon.
Yeah, that does make sense to do that. It's a fear tactic. I guess a form of guerrilla warfare? Because I do remember there's have any of you seen the movie The Patriot? I think that's what it's called. It had Mel Gibson in it, and where he killed an entire group of soldiers by himself. That was actually depicting the real thing that happened, except it wasn't just one man and his kids. It was actually a group of soldiers who hid like ghosts. It made it seem like they were a ghost hiding in the war during that time. This was the start of guerrilla warfare, where they didn't fight fair, which now fighting fair is no longer a thing anymore, thanks to that. Because in those days they had, gentlemen's warfare, where everyone everyone stood in a line and fought. They took it to a new level. They don't want to lose their men, so they said, "Fuck you guys. We're gonna shoot you from a distance and hidden." That's basically what they said. And that is basically kind of what they're doing here, except less violent. They're trying to use fear. That's what I'm seeing with this little thing here. The Shadow Bolts costume thing. the the Nightmare Moon security system. That's what I see.
I'm not turning back now, I announced. You cannot continue, Nightmare Moon insisted. And I will strike you down if you try. Turn back now while I'm still feeling generous enough to give you the chance.
And exactly how would I do that? Was she going to drop the shield and let me out? A bar of static crept up the left screen, distorting Nightmare Moon's right wing. It didn't matter. I turned away from the 3 screens, casting my gaze about the room. I couldn't pick a cloud lock, but maybe I didn't have to. Maybe somewhere in this room there was a key.
What are you doing?
Nightmare Moon demanded. Ignoring you, the little pony in my head thought as I began to search the room. The cloud lock probably meant a cloud key. I had to find it while the spell persisted, and I would be able to pick it up with my hooves or teeth. Panels slid back from the frost-encrusted ceiling. Ceiling turrets dropped down, threatening but not yet taking aim.
Stop that!
The image of Nightmare Moon cried, insisting.
There's no other way inside. Don't waste your time.
I couldn't help it. A smile broke across my muzzle.
Oh, but there is, I told her. Know how I know? Because it's making you nervous.
The image on the right screen flickered with static, then righted itself. Wait. Security programs can't get nervous. I turned to face the screens, my eyes growing wide.
Last chance,
the face of Nightmare Moon warned me, full of regal anger.
Leave now. No, I'm not leaving,
I told her defiantly.
Because the lives of good ponies are at stake. Because the evil attacking the innocent has to be stopped. Because Equestria deserves the sun.
I stepped towards the screens, watching as a wave of distortion warped the image of Nightmare Moon.
I'm not leaving because this is my destiny.
I stopped, staring coldly at the flickering images of the evil black alicorn. Looking into those dragon-like eyes, as if willing my gaze beyond the screen, beyond the facade. I took a deep breath and spat out.
And because you are not Nightmare Moon.
The screens flickered, and the images of Nightmare Moon vanished, to be replaced with a much kinder visage.
Destiny is only what you make it to be,
Celestia told me. I told myself this was another layer of the security program. This wasn't actually Celestia. The gentle goddess had transcended death, rose up to the heavens. Even now, she was watching over all the ponies of Equestria, hearing our prayers. Not this. This wasn't what I believed.
Stop with the games.
I can already tell where this is going. I'm going to say this now. Why does it seem like every Fallout game there's a computerized character? Or something very high and mighty that sounds virtuous? Like, say, Mr. House from Fallout New Vegas, or in Fallout 3, that one computer guy, I can't remember, who controlled this hub. Controlled the Enclave. Who controlled the Enclave? It's kind of the same concept that I'm saying here.
Crossly.
Get out,
the image of Celestia commanded, spreading feathery white wings across the right and left screens in a stance of royal dominance.
This place is not for you.
I shook my head.
Get out how? However you got in.
My jaw dropped. Whatever. Didn't know.
Weren't you paying attention?
What sort of crappy security system was this?
Spike sent me. Sorry, don't have another dragon in my saddlebags.
The Celestia image mouthed Spike's name, looking surprised.
You had yourself burned alive?
The majestic image of the white alicorn asked. The line of static started to crawl across the center monitor.
And who are?
The alicorn trailed off, seeming to look at me for the first time.
Wait, don't I know you?
Know me? I repeated, feeling like I was losing the ground beneath my hooves.
Why would you know me? I watch so many ponies,
The image of Celestia confessed.
in my prison. All I can do is watch and listen, until sometimes I cannot bear to watch any more.
Prison? That... Goddesses. Was I actually believing this? That I was speaking to Celestia herself?
You
That the
probably
goddess-
are. Because she
princess-
probably put her brain into it. Like Mr. House did. Mr. House put himself into a computer so he can have his longevity. He said that himself. If you actually look at the dialogue of New Vegas, if you actually go through that dialogue, he tells you that he made himself that way so he can continue his longevity. Exact words, like...
Was somehow trapped here? Why else would she refer to this as a prison? But that meant...
But I do remember watching you before.
Celestia interrupted my epiphany, her voice taking on a motherly tone. Almost gentle, but not without an edge.
You are little Pip, she of the colorful vulgarities, am I right?
Of the... Celestia knew me for that? I wanted to hide, but there simply was not enough of everything in the universe to bury myself under.
The pony on the radio has good things to say about you,
Celestia continued, my embarrassment compounding with her mention of my inflated reputation. Of course, she had been hearing
Somewhat.
everything Homage had said, and all the DJ ponies before her. They had, after all, been tapping into the SPP towers to broadcast, using Twilight Sparkle's emergency broadcast station no less. All I can do is watch and listen.
You are not like the ponies who have sought to enter this place before. The horrible things they did in their efforts to get inside.
I winced, the little pony in my head cringing in sympathetic heartache as I imagined what it must have been like for Celestia to see an alicorn wearing her sister's bones.
Oh God! Don't remind me.
To rest, I told her quickly.
Don't remind me
wanting-
about that. God, stop telling me about the bones. We get it. We've heard it a million times. It's already heartbreaking. And K-Cat, I know it's your intent to break all our hearts at this point, but seriously.
To ease the harmful memory.
I burned Luna's bones, and slew the monster who desecrated her.
My words felt weak, pathetic, like they weren't worthy of Celestia. But the expression on her face was one of such undeserved gratitude that I found myself bowing before her just to escape it.
Rise, my little pony.
Celestia chided softly.
I am no one worth your deference.
I glanced up in surprise at her melancholy words, not moving from my position.
There are too many dead because of me for any pony to show me such reverence. I would bow to you if I could.
I stood up quickly.
What? No.
I was appalled, and to my surprise, a little cross.
What happened wasn't your fault. The war, the mega spells, the horrible things we've done in your absence, none of it's your fault.
Celestia merely looked at me sadly. Her perfect voice began to soak with the sound of tears she couldn't really shed.
But it is My Little Pony,
She insisted.
I chose the site for Luna's school. There were 3 sites equally suitable, but I chose the Crescent Moon Canyon because it amused me, because I wanted to see my sister's face when I told her I was sending her students to the moon.
And now I could see tears in Celestia's eyes, static warping the image on the central monitor.
I put those children there for a joke.
I hadn't imagined this. My nerves felt covered in ice. My eyes burned. I felt the heat of a tear trickle down my right cheek as I began to cry for my goddess.
And that's not the end of it,
Celestia claimed.
When the zebra struck, Luna and I worked together, holding up the shield, giving all of our subjects time to get to their stables, even though the cloud would kill us. We took shifts at first, each of us holding the shield while the other gathered healing supplies, then while the other just rested.
Sacrifice.
But my sister
Celestia's voice trembled.
was younger, weaker, and no matter what I did, I couldn't prevent her from dying in my arms.
Don't make me cry.
Tears streamed down from her
Don't make
quivering
me cry.
lavender eyes.
Don't make me cry.
I held Luna until her body had grown cold.
Goddesses. Goddess. Luna, have mercy on your sister.
And then, stricken with grief, I flew away. I abandoned dead Canterlot, letting the shield fall, unleashing a fatal flood on the poor towns below.
Apple Snack died, I recalled, painfully, in the seconds that followed. He hadn't seen Celestia's flight from the royal castle, but that could be forgiven. He was focused on the horrific wave of pink coming to consume him. As terrible and painful as her confessions were, Celestia was not finished.
I was blind with grief, with the loss of my sister. But as I flew over Whitetail Woods, I saw Zebra Megaspell missiles. 3 of them, headed towards Canterlot. The zebras were not content to murder Luna. They intended to obliterate the city that had become her grave, to wipe the entire mountain off the map, to utterly erase her.
I remembered the words of Steelhooves. I heard rumors in the days after the apocalypse that after the shield fell, the zebras launched megaspells to finally obliterate the city. But if that is true, then those missiles never reached their destination. Whitetail Wood.
Cage used to call that the most poisoned place in Equestria.
Timidly, I heard myself squeak.
What did you do? I destroyed them,
Celestia said, her sad voice taking on a hard edge.
My grief turned to rage, and I tore them apart, reduced them to dust as I flew between them.
Well, good for you, the little pony in my head said with an angry stomp. The blade of anger evaporated from her voice, leaving only regret.
The winds carried the radiation and poison from those weapons all across Whitetail Wood, covering Equestria's once beautiful forest and poisoning the reservoir, all the way to the edge of Ponyville.
As Celestia spoke, my thoughts traveled back to my first minutes outside the stable, to just how sick and poisoned Sweet Apple Acres had been, the very ground making my pip-buck click.
My rage,
Celestia bemoaned.
when it left me, I felt like I had been stripped of my flesh, my heart. My soul was raw, and I was afraid.
The expression on Celestia's face was unfathomable.
I was dying, and I was afraid.
I wanted to hug her, to bury my head in her royal white coat and weep. For her, for Luna, for everything.
I should have let myself die,
Celestia said.
That way, at least, I could have been with Luna. But I didn't. I was selfish. I've lived so long that death, ending, was alien and horrifying to me. So instead, I let my cowardice bring me here.
Here. The Single Pegasus Project.
That's not cowardice,
I offered earnestly.
that's normal.
The idea of anything about the goddesses being normal was jarring to me.
We all fear death. That's part of being a pony.
With a second thought, I added,
It's part of being alive.
Celestia seemed mildly thankful for my effort.
And as a reward, I have been trapped here, in my prison, my purgatory, listening to the victims of my sins, unable to act, unable to help.
She seemed to look past me, her gaze shifting across the bones.
I've done what I could to prevent any pony from becoming like me, and to prevent those camped outside from gaining access to this place.
I opened my muzzle, tried to say something, to protest, to find some way to console her. She listened for a moment before gently cutting me off. Instead, a voice I had heard months ago filled the winter vestibule. "Hello? Is any pony out there?" The long-dead stallion asked, his voice heavy with resignation. He didn't really expect the help he would never receive. "Please, we need help. I was bringing my family to the stable up near Sweet Apple Acres when we were attacked by raiders. Only my son and I survived. We made it to the stable, but it's all sealed up. There's no way inside. My son, he ate one of those apples from those damned apple trees up near the stable, and now he's terribly sick. Too sick to move. We've holed up in a cistern near the old memorial. We're running out of food and medical supplies. Please, if any pony hears this, help us. Message repeats." I was struck by a ghost of realization I first had hearing it. The unnamed father had already lost hope, and by the time he made that recording, he was just going through the motions. And Celestia had been hearing that broadcast, reciting the death of a cult from the poisons she had spread across Whitetail Wood, playing it over and over again for who knew how many years, until I came along and shut it down. I broke down crying. Celestia wept with me.
"You are not like those camped outside,"
she repeated when my resolve to complete my mission overrode my sorrow, and I finally began to wipe away my tears. I knew she must have meant the Enclave. It struck me as odd that she wouldn't have known who I was when I first appeared. She didn't seem aware of the battle raging just beyond the shield, or the purpose of my appearance. All I can do is watch and listen, until sometimes I cannot bear to watch any more.
"Celestia,"
I asked gently.
"when did you stop watching?"
Her answer should not have surprised me. Friendship City. It had been the Equestrian Wasteland's darkest hour. If I had been watching, unable to help, I believe I would have averted my gaze too. It took me a few minutes to fill Celestia in on what she had missed.
What did happen to you?"
I finally asked, my voice cautious. I tried to brace myself for whatever answer would come. I needed to know, but I didn't think I could bear hearing even more of my Celestia's pain.
"How is it that you're here? Like this?"
My first assumption would have been that Celestia had entered the control pod herself. But if she had, wouldn't she have done a long time ago what I intended to do now? And hadn't the Ministry of Awesome Systems confirmed that the central hub was empty?
"I came here," Celestia told me. "I knew my body was dying, but I knew of the Crusader mainframes, of the chance for continued life they offered. So I came here."
She looked askance.
"Part of me hoped that in taking control of this place, I would be able to help all my little ponies, that I could still do some good to try to make up for my failures. But when I found myself downloaded into the mainframe and trapped, helpless, I have control over a few security systems, but that is all. I can only listen and watch."
Downloaded. My forehooves raised to my muzzle as I gasped.
"None of that download your brain nonsense,"
Rainbow Dash had explained to Luna.
"I had them disconnect all that stuff. I want a living pony running Equestria's weather, not some machine that thinks it's a pony." Rainbow Dash. Apple Bloom, I said weakly. Celestia, they disconnected the mental download system for the controls. That was part of the design.
I had known this, but I had imagined they would remove that part of the Crusader mainframe completely, not left it intact but severed. Spike had once asked me, "Have you ever heard the old saying, the portal to hell is open with the incantation of good intentions?" If there was a moral to their story, I guess that would be it.
I know that now,
Celestia said mournfully. She had made a mistake. A simple, understandable mistake with numbingly tragic consequences. It was the story of Equestria's fall in miniature. DJ Pony's words rang in my head. The one great reality of the wasteland. The truth of the matter. Every pony has done something they regret. The rational part of my mind reared up. If that was what had happened, then this wasn't really Celestia I was talking to. It was just a program. Just the illusion of memories. Downloading your mind into a Crusader mainframe doesn't actually put you into the computer. It just makes a copy of your brain. The only way that... I thought of Elder Cottage Cheese and his unholy intentions. He had planned to truly live forever by not only turning the Crusader mainframe into a duplicate of his mind, but then transferring his very soul into the machine, using it as a soul jar. My face rose towards Celestia, my eyes opening in terrible realization as Rarity's words once again whispered through my mind. She'd tried to have Spike burn it, and all that did was send it to Princess Celestia. Princess Celestia had, for a time, been in possession of the Black Book.
You...
I stared, aghast.
Yes,
Celestia confirmed regretfully, not even needing to hear the question.
The spells were so easy to learn that I knew them the moment I opened those pages. And how could I have resisted just to look?
I felt a black chill.
When you live as long as I have, boredom becomes an enemy, she explained. In its own way, as dangerous to me as discord, especially when I was alone.
Celestia sighed.
In the centuries after I banished Nightmare Moon, I turned to learning everything I could about the mysterious, the secret, and the forbidden. I even learned tidbits of zebra alchemy and dragon magic, those few things which a pony such as myself could possibly perform. Later, I even built a school to teach those things, the things that I knew were safe, at least.
Dragon magic? Was that how she sent scrolls back to Spike? I couldn't help but ask.
Yes, she told me with a nostalgic smile. I learned that from the dragon you now know as Mouse.
She continued.
The secrets of the Black Book were a temptation that played on centuries of habit.
No wonder the shield around the SPP central hub was so invulnerable. No wonder it had lasted so long. It was being powered by Celestia's soul.
That's incredible.
Another thought occurred to me. This was it, then. I was never getting out. Not that I had ever intended or suspected I would, but, in the very least, I couldn't leave until the threat of the Enclave was dismantled entirely. It did no good to end the war today, if it just started again tomorrow. Still, the reality of my eternal incarceration was like a heavy blanket. Yet, still, I held my head up. I would never see my friends again. I was going to be hated and villainized by the Pegasi. But it was all going to be worth it to bring the sunlight back to Equestria. To stop the Enclave. Hell, it would be worth it just for Silverbell to get to see real rainbows.
Yeah.
I stepped towards the door. My only regret was that I wouldn't be with Homage ever again. That I wouldn't be able to hold her one last time. I stopped, looking up at the screens.
Can I see them?
I asked.
My friends. From in here? Of course, My Little Pony.
My heart leapt.
The little pony in my head was bouncing around with unexpected anticipation. My first instinct was to ask about Homage, but I had a friend for which I felt a much more pressing concern. "Please, Celestia," I begged. "Show me Ditsy-Do. Show me what happened to her. I need to know if she's all right." Princess Celestia vanished, her image replaced by scenes of the Battle of Philadelphia. Each monitor showed footage recorded by the SPP towers, 2 showing recent events, while the third played in real time. I watched as Ditsy-Do, like a golden green light of hope, rose out of the Philadelphia crater and flew up through the clouds. And I watched as she came back, her sonic rad boom clearing the skies over Philadelphia, allowing the rays of Celestia 1 to strike. I watched as she fell, and I cheered when Lionheart caught her. On the central screen, I could see Ditsy-Do, right now, standing on the overturned hulk of a chariot, gazing wall-eyed over a sea of scrambling slave ponies, her blackboard in her teeth. This way to freedom and muffins. Beyond her, a gaping hole had been torn in the wall, the wreckage from the barrier used to bridge the moat of toxic sludge. Lionheart was standing beside the passage to freedom. Near his hooves, a dozen monsters from the sludge moat lay dead, their pink-tainted corpses surrounding a triumphant-looking white field mouse. "Thanks, Celestia," I said without thinking. Then, blushing, I asked, "Show me Zenith?" The screens changed. I watched my zebra friends infiltrate Philadelphia until she had reached Stern. I saw the fight that began on the rooftop of the Ministry of Morale, and that ended on a gabled rooftop on the far side of the city. I looked on as, right now, Zenith lay bleeding and barely conscious under the cover of a cave formed from rubble as her daughter, the Doctor of Glyphmark, tended to her wounds. In the background, the sky erupted with light as a concentrated sunbeam flared down from the heavens and detonated an Enclave bombing wagon.
Sorry. Excuse me.
If Celestia 1 was working, then that gave me hope for my other friends as well. "Could you show me Reggie, please? And Lifebloom?" Monitors replayed the sight of God's griffins clearing the sky over Tempony Tower, interspersed with glimpses of the Twilight Society. Celestia was somehow able to show me the inside of the Megaspell chamber even. The left hoof monitor was showing God and Reggie as they flew towards the roof of Tempony Tower, supporting a wounded Blackwing between them. "If I do become arbiter of a new Canterlot Republic," God was telling the wounded griffin, "I would be honored to have you on a co-council. Don't you think you should choose a pony for that?" Blackwing suggested. "You wouldn't want to give the impression that Equestia is under Griffin control, would you?" It took me a moment to realize that they were missing someone. I turned to the other monitors in time to watch the fight begin. I felt a sharp pain as I looked at Butcher and realized she wasn't going to survive. I gasped when Reggie was struck by the poisonous tail, and I whooped when she shot back up through the clouds with little Gilda. "Who would you suggest then, huh?" God asked on the left screen, as their surviving trio neared the rooftop. A pony galloped onto the roof to greet them. I heard Reggie's voice. "Lifebloom." "Enough," I said with a wave of my hoof, not needing to see any more. Those who survived the fight would recover, but we had taken losses. I knew we would, but that didn't lessen the hurt. If anything, we had gotten lucky that it wasn't much, much worse. "Show me Velvet Remedy?" On the central screen, the beautiful charcoal-coated unicorn was singing into a headset as she trotted between wounded Enclave soldiers, lined up inside the protective barrier generated by several green alicorns. She had set up a triage for the enemy, helping out every pony wounded in the battle. As I watched, a purple alicorn teleported to inside the shield, bearing another fallen soldier. Velvet Remedy interrupted her song once again, rushing to the wounded Pegasi's aid. The side monitors displayed how Velvet Remedy had taken over the broadcast center. Not a single shot fired or a pony wounded. I'd never felt more proud, joyous. And yet, My knees felt weak, and a nervous sweat broke out over my body as I asked timidly, "Celestia, please, show me homage." This time, only a single screen lit up with a view of the wasteland. Celestia reappeared on the other two, watching me tenderly. I could see contrails of black smoke in the sky. The camera shifted downward, zooming in on a ridge of rock. Amongst the rocks was a small cave, little more than an indentation that some pony had built ramshackle walls into, and sparse furniture, all scaled for very small ponies. A little sign was nailed to the front, the word clearly painted by a young foal. Rockopolis. No fillies allowed. Through the almost rectangular window, I could see a very dirty, very haggard homage, her mane in filthy tangled strings, curled up amongst a few empty cans of century-old tomato paste.
The no fillies allowed sign. That's a reference to two things, I think. One from I think Little Rascals, and the other one is a reference to that civilization full of children, and in Fallout 3. So
Hiding. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then, and possibly, homage shifted. She looked up, right up at the camera that was high on the tower, so far away that she couldn't possibly see it. Her muzzle opened, and she mouthed the words, "I love you, little Pip." I broke down crying again. "Homage has been using the towers for a long time," Celestia reminded me. "She knows of them." And somehow, my homage, the mare who had seen ghosts, found weapons from space, and had encounters with strange ponies who lived in blue boxes, could feel that she was being actively watched. My horn glowed, and I floated up to the monitor, pressing my hooves against it, just trying to be closer. "I made it," I told her. "I burned alive, but I'm okay." "She can't hear you," Celestia said. I lowered my hooves, still floating next to the screen as I drank in the sight of the mare I loved. With that, Celestia informed me, "I could send you back." A portal of green dragon fire erupted in the room behind me. "Back to Spike. You could be with her tonight." "What?" I fell back to the floor with a thud. I couldn't have just heard that right. But I had. The green fire behind me, Celestia explained, was like that which she had once used to send messages to Spike. Once I burned to death again, Spike would literally burp me out, alive and whole. Indescribably painful, but efficient. And a little bit gross. "Now that you know how to get here through Dragonfire, you can return to your friends and your loved ones," Celestia offered me. "You can go, help them with their fight, and send someone else in your place tomorrow. You don't have to do this anymore." The image of homage flickered away, replaced by the sight of Celestia's gentle, caring eyes. "You deserve to be happy." I found myself faced with two choices. The small door that led deeper into the SPP, or another death by dragonfire, this one able to send me back to my friends. It was almost too much for me to bear. "I can't," I told her, almost wailing. "We'll never get this close again. The Enclave is too strong. They'll regroup. If we don't win today, they won't give us a second chance." "The magic of Spike's fire is not short-range, little Pip," Celestia claimed. "You don't have to get this close again." I rocked on my hooves. That was true, and I wanted so much to be with homage again. To be with all of my friends. I didn't want the life I had grown to love, despite all the pain and horror, to end here. "That's natural," My Little Pony echoed. I thought of my talk with Velvet Remedy 2 days ago. How could I ask from some pony else what I wouldn't give myself?
Especially, My Little Pony added, when it means asking them to die for you, even if it might only be temporary.
Every pony I know.
Of the ones I can trust something like that to, at least.
They all deserve to be happy too, just as much or more than I do.
I stared at the monitor where Homage had whispered her love, and I thought of what Homage would say. I couldn't help but snicker as I realized she would probably ask if I'd been staring at Celestia's flank. Celestia raised an eyebrow as I began to giggle. I giggled because I knew what Homage would say if she could see me right now. She wouldn't beg me to step through that fire. She wouldn't ask me to be with her at the cost of another. Nor would she feel the need to push me to stay. All the things she had to say on that subject she'd already said last night. She'd trust me to make the right decision. No need to hammer the point.
You're laughing.
I nodded, failing to stifle a chortle.
Because I know if Homage was here, she'd probably tell me, don't do anything too naughty with the goddess until I can figure out how to make it a threesome.
Celestia's eyes went wide. As I realized what I had just said out loud, and to whom, my face broke into the fiercest blush. But Celestia's expression caused me to collapse in laughter again.
You have an interesting mare friend,
was all Celestia could manage to say. It took me a moment to recover, wiping tears of an entirely different sort from my eyes. I knew what I had to do. On the other side of that shield, Spike believed he had killed me. I couldn't imagine what he might be feeling, or how he would react when my friends rejoined him. I couldn't leave him like that. Concentrating, I floated up the clipboard, searching for ink. Finding none, I shattered the Sunrise sarsaparilla bottle with a hoof, and used one of the shards of glass to draw blood, ignoring the slight pain. Compared to burning alive, a small cut was nothing. Then, using my blood, I began to write a message. Dear Spike, I'm alive. I'm inside with Celestia. Thank you. I'm very, very, very sorry. Please, someday forgive me. Little Pip. P.S. It hurt a lot. Without a word, I sent the message back through the portal. Celestia watched in silence. When I was done, she smiled at me.
I'm proud of you, Little Pip, but I'm holding the fire open for you. Why? Because I know now where I've seen you. Twilight's last act was to save you,
Celestia informed me.
Was it for this? For you to give up your life just a week later?
She who I had worshipped as a goddess was trying to dissuade me from my mission. Not because I was not worthy, but because I was worth too much.
Life is a gift, I told her. I'm not so selfish as to ask any pony else to give theirs up, so I don't have to. Life,
Celestia remarked sadly,
is not always a gift, and death is inevitable, or at least it should be. Even my sister died.
The melancholy in her voice was unbearable.
That's the real evil of the Black Book. It changes that. It steals death from you and calls it a gift. It's lying. I've lived so long alone, watching ponies die. I've seen more than you could know. Please, trust me when I say that the ponies you saved by sacrificing yourself will soon die anyway.
I couldn't believe my ears. This was not the Celestia I worshipped.
No!
What are you saying?
No! Hold on! Yes, we're all going to die anyway. No matter how much you try to prevent death, yes, death is inevitable. And that's the price we pay for that. Humans cannot be immortal, and that's our curse. As much as long as we want to live, humans are the only ones that truly fear death. Yes, all animals fight to survive, because their goal in life is to continue on with their species. Us, we are selfish. Humans are selfish because we want We want to live because we don't want to die. We fear what's on the other side, side of death. We don't want to see the void. But that's what makes us human. Is that we try to make our lives the best in case there's nothing good in case there is nothing good on the other side. I don't think Celestius understands that.
I'm saying, isn't it better for the gift of a slightly longer life to be given to those who have truly earned it, who deserve it the most? Isn't it better to hold on to those you love? As hurtful as it was to hear those words from the one who was supposed to be my gentle and loving goddess, she wasn't without a point. And if the war I allow to continue today should kill Homage tomorrow, I asked, or kill the pony another loves, somebody else's Homage, how could I live with that? And how deserving would I be of another day? How could you even ask? I could hear the undercurrent of pain in Celestia's voice. I suppose I've always played favorites. I thought of her favorite student. And what would Twilight Sparkle do, if given this choice? I felt immediately awful for invoking Twilight, realizing how much that must hurt her. What right did I have, particularly after what I had done?
And this is why Little Pip is such a great character. Her element is sacrifice. She will not let others sacrifice their own lives for her own happiness. In a way, that's her form of generosity. Maybe Little Pip is the element of generosity, if I'm right.
Celestia fell silent. I wondered if I had driven her away, for whatever quality of away her prison allowed her.
When Twilight was younger, she wanted to do what you are doing. She wanted to brave the Everfree Forest alone, to not risk any pony else,
Celestia had told me.
Her friends would not let her. After that, I'm not sure. I'd like to believe that she'd stay with her friends, and they would work a way through it together. But
the ministries. I felt a flare of protective anger. Was Celestia suggesting my friends had failed me? Or was I reading too much in those words?
But even her friends, I pointed out, were also willing to step back and allow her to do what she had to do, even if that meant, for a moment, leaving her vulnerable. And you know what happened, Celestia replied gently. Twilight was always weakest when separated from her friends, and you will be too.
I felt the presence of the statuettes in my saddlebags. They were stronger together, better. Oh, goddesses, or goddess, as the case seemed to be. I began to understand, not just what Celestia was saying, but why she was saying it. I began to grasp why Celestia had become so different from the goddess whom I prayed to.
Welcome back.
Celestia.
I've been standing here for like 3 minutes.
3 minutes? Hi everyone, that's my wife. Say hi.
No,
They're gonna say hi anyway.
I came to give you kisses. Not on camera, but
I began cautiously.
How long have you been without your friends? How long have you been alone?
Again, Celestia was silent. Then, after a long and somber pause, she answered.
Longer than I've been here. You don't have to be anymore. Little Pip.
The eyes of the alicorn on the screens widened.
No pony should be alone, Celestia.
Not even one like you.
Ponies need friends. They need the magic of friendship. Without it,
I trailed off.
Friendship never changes.
The ponies of Equestria had lost their son in more ways than one. But I could change that.
I'm here, and I'm not leaving you.
Celestia said nothing. The green flames evaporated. The small door unlocked and opened, revealing a short hallway leading to another door. Inside the hallway, a small alcove held the download device. The metal helmet, encrusted with lights and gems, was laying next to the long-horned skull of a large winged pony skeleton. A Celestia skeleton. I took a few steps forward, then stopped. Focusing, I wrapped the bones of Princess Celestia in my magic, and floated them out into the winter vestibule.
Please, as you did for my sister,
Celestia requested. It took me a little while to find a way to set the bones on fire, but eventually the pyre crackled. I realized I would need to do the same for each of the skeletons in here before I settled into the control pod. But I could burn all of those together. Celestia's bones deserved the honor of their own fire. Sitting beneath the monitors, I watched the funeral, Celestia watching with me. I was startled when a mechanical whine started somewhere in the central hub, and hidden fans began to suck the smoke from the room, replenishing the winter vestibule with fresh summer air. Between the fire and the air, the enchanted frost began to melt, and the fog on the ground faded away. Finally, I stood up again. It was time. As I walked into the hallway, Celestia opened the final door. The Crusader mainframe of the Single Pegasus project reminded me of a tree. The large central stalk glistened with running lines of mystical energy. Lights blinked in arcane sequences along branches that stretched out from the trunk, connecting to smaller mainframes that lined the walls. The metal oval of the control pod was nestled amongst root-like conglomerations of wires. It struck me simultaneously as being like an egg, fallen from a nest and cracked, and a rabbit hole, dug into the base of a tree, leading to mysterious places. 3 other doors marked cardinal points. The writing above them claimed they led to spring, summer, and autumn vestibules. A stray memory flitted through my head like an errant butterfly. "Okay, here's another one," Spike had said, telling us stories of his long-gone friends, the Ministry Mares. "This is the story about Twilight Sparkle's first winter wrap-up." "What's a winter wrap-up?" Calamity had asked, just before the shaken-up Sparkle Cola had passed to him his face. I chuckled as I remembered his expression. In the aftermath, Spike had explained that normally in Equestria, the changing of the seasons had been accomplished in part by magic. Later, I had heard Rainbow Dash bemoan the need to abandon the war effort once a year to help with the winter wrap-up. Somehow, I had forgotten the scope of what the Single Pegasus project was designed to do. One part of the winter wrap-up, the part Applejack had always been in charge of, was planting seeds for the next year's crops. Even that, I realized, was under the Single Pegasus project's purview. That was, in fact, part of what the Enclave had hacked into, altering it to fit their needs. Cloud seeding. And this was going to be one big responsibility. I lifted the hatch to the control pod, looking inside at what would be my new home. The interior was plush, comfortable, and like a cloud, but solid, just in case the operator wasn't a Pegasus, I suspected. Likely thanks to the oversight of Applebloom. The headset looked an awful lot like the one in the hall. But there were enough differences to distinguish the two. No flashing lights. Quite a few more gems. I concentrated, my magic unfastening my saddlebags and letting them drop to the floor. As I removed my armor, I opened those bags for the last time, floating out the small number of keepsakes I had brought with me. Treasures full of memories and ghosts. Calamity's hat. The Fluttershy orb from Velvet Remedy. The drawing by Silverbell. Gifts from my friends, all of them. One by one, I set them down in a circle on the interior edge of the control pod. I wanted them close to me while I slept. Little Macintosh. The statuettes of the Ministry Mares. I never did learn what finally happened to Rainbow Dash. My Little Pony mused. Probably for the best. It's good that there are still some mysteries left in the world. The ashes of the filly from Friendship City. And finally, orb number 8. The last one I set next to the headgear. The very last thing I would do before closing the hatch and sliding into a controlled coma was to watch it. I knew it would take precious time, but never seeing it was one sacrifice I wasn't willing to make. I wasn't quite a paragon of my virtue after all. I looked at Calamity's hat. The memory from our first visit to Spike's cave had reminded me that there was one friend I hadn't looked in on yet.
Princess Celestia, if you would,
I asked as I trotted back into the winter vestibule.
show me Calamity.
The screens changed to pictures of frantic battle. On one screen, Calamity was dodging pursuit as he tried to plant explosives in the New Hope solar array. On another, he was facing off with an Enclave officer in some sort of storeroom. On the third, Spike flew across the screen, the camera turning to track him. Between two of his claw tips, I could see he was clutching the clipboard. I heard the explosive retort of Spitfire's thunder. Calamity was strapped onto Spike's back with rope, as was the hellhound Barkinsaw. My Pegasus friend's wing had been inexpertly wrapped in healing bandages. He'd overstrained the healing limb, and now it wasn't working at all. Together, Calamity and the hellhound sharpshooter were sniping incoming missiles before they could reach the dragon. "If Little Pip's okay, then let's get Velvet and get out of here," Calamity shouted as he fought to reload. "We fall back to y'all know where." Blood dribbled from Spike's destroyed eye. A painful grimace crossed his bloodied snout. "The Enclave know me," he growled despondently. "They know where I live. As soon as word gets out, they're going to retaliate." Calamity understood the severity of Spike's tone when he said, "They'll hit the cave, with everything they can." My heart skipped a beat. The Gardens of Equestria. "Yep," Calamity said grimly. "And that's where we're pulling everything we got back there. Form a line of defense." As Spike banked to avoid a barrage of plasma fire, each bolt wider than a pony, Calamity scrambled to not drop the anti-machine rifle. "All we gotta do is keep 'em out till Little Pip can clear the clouds. After that, we got Celestia 1 as defense." I felt a surge of panic and fought it back down. It would be hours before they even got back to Spike's cave, longer before the Enclave could regroup. But the sense of urgency that I had somehow allowed to slip had finally returned in full force.
Celestia,
I asked, realizing how much more there would be to do.
will you help me?
"Of course, Little Pip." I walked out of the winter vestibule and back into the small hallway. I paused at the alcove with the downloader.
They won't understand,
I said, realizing it not for the first time.
the Pegasi especially. They won't understand why.
Not that it mattered. I was trying to do the right thing for every pony, for everyone, the only way I knew how. I heard Scootaloo's voice in my memories.
This isn't our Equestria anymore. It's not the happy, safe, pleasant world any of us grew up in. I don't understand how it could have gotten this way. How could it have gotten this bad? Some pony needs to figure it out, and fix it, and if I have to become the villain of the piece to do that, then I will.
I was Scootaloo. At least a little.
I'll be able to watch everything, right?
I asked.
Will I be able to talk to them? Or at least send a message?
Celestia was quiet a moment. Then,
Not as the system is now, she informed me. Or I would have done so long ago. But with a good toasted repair pony, that would be an easy fix.
My ears burned a little, but the little pony in my head pranced in glee. I looked at the download device. It was meant to make a copy of a pony's entire mind in a few hours. How quickly, then, could it make a simple copy of a couple months?
I want to send a message, I told Celestia as I wrapped up the helmet in my magic, turning the download station on. I want to tell them what happened, to explain, even if they never believe me. I owe them all that much.
Again, I asked.
Will you help me?
Again, the answer.
Of course, my little pony.
2 months. The copy process should only take minutes. Add an hour for editing and adding in a few thoughts. I slipped the helmet onto my head and started up the Arcanotech device. I felt the odd sense of mental pressure as the device synced up to my brain and experienced an odd taste, like that of muffin-flavored cake. I took a deep breath as I tried to figure out just how to begin. Then, I began thinking. If I'm going to tell you about the adventure of my life, explain how I got to this place with these people, and why I did what I'm going to do next, I should probably start by explaining a little bit about Pip-Bucks.
You tell me the story was all written in that hub. Here comes the epilogue.
"2 weeks. It's been 2 weeks since the afternoon that wastelanders everywhere have come to call the day of sunshine and rainbows. The day that massive surges of rainbow light and sound, sonic rain booms, burst from 23 of the great towers, clearing away the blankets of clouds that have covered the skies above us for all of our lives, and the lives of everyone and everything born after the Great War. For me, there's a memory that will symbolize that day forever. I looked up, watching those expanding rings of fantastic rainbow light burst the clouds, sending showers down on the wasteland.
Oh, you have to go.
And as
But we're not done yet. We're not done yet. Oh, you can always come back and finish.
I turned my face towards the sun for the very first time, I saw how the misty rainfall sparkled, and then I spotted the balefire phoenix, her coat of majestic, iridescent emerald and gold, dancing and cavorting amongst the ephemeral rainbows forming all across the sun-drenched sky. It was the single most beautiful sight I have seen in my long life. Thank you, little Pip, from all of us. Now, children, as you know, the sonic rain booms almost tore most of the remaining Enclave raptors out of the sky. The few that remain have returned to the sides of the Enclave's remaining thunderheads, and turned their firepower on the Pegasus ponies who have been rising up to throw off the Enclave's tyranny. The war is over, but it would appear that the war is just another prologue to another bloody chapter in equestrian history. The Civil War tears apart the sky, and here below the remnants of Red Eye's armies have divided into war camps, each determined to carve out a swath of the wasteland as their own little empire, the ground soaked in violence and the blood of any...
Okay, after all our hardships she has faced, our hero is finally safe. She ends her last quest and takes a well-deserved rest, and then writes the best book in the West.
Pony who challenges them. But this time is different, children, because this time we have hope. Hope that the Equestria of tomorrow will actually be a better place than the Equestria of today, that we may actually know peace in our children's lifetime. Hope brought to us by our Lightbringer, yes, and more importantly, hope brought to us by ourselves, by our embrace of our nobler nature. Over the last few weeks, the actions of so many of you have shone more brilliantly than the sun itself, so much that it's made this old DJ cry. Children, old DJ Pony ain't never been prouder of you. Now listen up, children. Old DJ Pony's got a message for all you faithful listeners, and this one's important. The word of the day is forgiveness. We've all suffered at the hooves of the Enclave, and I know just how easy it will be to direct all of our hate towards every pony out there with wings. But the Enclave ain't every Pegasus, and even a great many of those in the Enclave weren't keen on what their leaders were doing. Many stood up against them, and many were murdered.
I would. I understand the spoiler thing, but for me, spoilers won't really matter if I don't know if it's a spoiler. And two, I don't have anybody to look up these images for me. My wife isn't a brony or a Pegasister, so she wouldn't know. And I don't know any other bronies here on where I am. Physical spoilers? I'm imagining Rarity right now. No spoilers! Either way, I'll try to avoid them as best I can. Well, anyway, must continue the epilogue.
At Fort. We need to embrace our Pegasi sisters and brothers. Welcome them. Things are gonna be hard for them. Hell, hard for all of us. We need to show love, tolerance, and acceptance. We need to be the sort of ponies the stable dweller trusted and believed we could be. The sort of ponies you've proven you can be. The same message goes for the Alicorns. They ain't the monsters they used to be. They're ponies, hurt ones at that. Yes, there are several poisonous apples out there. Some of them just don't seem to know any other way. But most of those Alicorns are just lost. They're trying to figure out.
You can stay? I hope you're not... I'm not holding you back from anything.
Who they are, to reckon their place in the world, not unlike a certain little unicorn who stepped hoof out of a stable less than 3 months ago. And there are some, more than just a few, who have chosen to side with the heroes of the wasteland. So if you see an Alicorn, keep your weapon loaded, but try talking first. You just might find a friend. Remember, children, is the one great truth of the wasteland. We've all done something that we regret. We all need a little forgiveness. And that's the truth of the matter. And with that said, I've got a special treat for all you faithful listeners out there. I have here in the studio Velvet Remedy, here for a rare interview with yours truly. I know, I usually farm out interviews to my #1 assistant, but this is a special case, and Ahmed has been rather busy. But first, some news. The fires of Everfree Forest have finally died. Bizarrely, a lot of the forest, the trees at least, seem completely unharmed. Given time, the undergrowth is likely to grow back. However, I have it on good authority that the Applejacks Rangers have taken up a project to convert much of the forest area to farmland, pending negotiations with the Children of the Cathedral, a relatively non-hostile band of Red-Eye remnants who have made their home in the wreckage of the Thunderhead Overcast. In related news, hostilities between the Steel Rangers and the heroic offshoot, the Applejacks Rangers, seem to have ceased, save for a few localized pockets of fighting. Apparently, the threat of genocide from above has helped put their conflict into perspective. Fierce battles continue throughout the ruins of Philadelphia, most notably between Talon mercenaries and the emerging Red-Eye Remnant's warlords. Unless your checklist of things you need to do by the end of the day includes violence and bloody dismemberment, I strongly advise you to keep out of Philadelphia for the foreseeable future. If you are amongst those civilians still trapped inside the ruins, seek out the nearest Talon not engaged in active hostilities. If at all possible, the Griffin will do his or her best to get you out of the war zone. Now, as many of you know from my first return broadcast, all those mysterious towers turned out to be part of a pre-war weather control system called the Single Pegasus Project. And that little Pip, the mayor I formerly referred to only as the Stable Dweller, and other titles, is currently placed under an induced coma, hooked into that system. Additionally, Celestia herself is bound, in mind and soul, into the SPP security system. So, I guess every pony who believed that Celestia was up there somewhere looking down on us was right. And that brings us to a bit of good news, and a bit of bad news. You see, children, little Pip was willing to sacrifice everything she had for all of us. Her friends honor that, but they're doing all they can to mitigate the price. 'Cause that's what friends do. They help each other, best they can. Despite the best efforts, it doesn't appear that control of the Single Pegasus Project security and weather control system can be integrated. Turns out, even if we had the technology, attempting to install it would require a full shutdown, and tear apart several components of the Crusader mainframe. And that ain't an option. The good news, however, is they've rigged up enhanced communication between the disparate systems. Not only does this mean that Little Pip and Celestia will be able to share time together, but that they should both be able to periodically converse with us down here as well. Sunlight and Celestia herself have been returned to the wasteland. Words, they just ain't able to express the magnitude of that. And, in a bit of further good news, the first message from Little Pip to all of us has been received. Now, it's a bit of a mess due to the way it was mentally transcribed, but the Twilight Society's expert in memory magic, a pony who I will add as a trusted friend, has taken it upon himself to sorta edit the memory dump, and we expect to have that message available for everyone living in the wasteland within another 2 weeks. And before you ask, my friend has assured me that the editing being performed will not diminish the message in any way. That ain't gonna be a short message by any stretch, but that no pony needs to know about every time Little Pip ate or had a bowel movement. To my friend, I can only say, I applaud your sacrifice. Finally, a bit of personal news.
I know you're going to like the certain thing in the epilogue and afterward. You didn't predict something last live You did predict something last live stream.
I, your voice in the wasteland, am going away again. Now, hopefully, it will not be for as long as my last vacation, and it is definitely under better circumstances. You see, children, now that the war is over and the sky is open, I've got a quest of my own to undertake. A role in the good fight that demands my personal attention. I'll report in whenever circumstances allow, but this may be the last bit of news you hear for a little while. Now, I hear some of you faithful listeners asking, "Hey, DJ Pony, does that mean that Little Pip is up there keeping an eye on all of us too, like a new benevolent goddess?" Well, I can tell you she wouldn't much care for the comparison, and the last thing she wants to be is prayed to. That's not a role she seeks for herself. Plus, I have it on good authority that she'll be getting some long and well-deserved rest. On the other hoof, even though I know she ain't that kind of pony, I'd still hesitate to throw round the old "may lightning strike me if" phrase quite so casually now. And I, for one, am already building up my stockpile of colorful Little Pip swears. And on that note, I introduce Velvet Remedy. Hello, medical pony. May I call you Velvet?
Of course you may. We're going to be traveling together for quite a while. Familiarity is expected.
Ah, yes. As it turns out, faithful listeners, Velvet here will be accompanying me on my little sojourns. And her husband will be joining us, Calamity, hero of the Battle of Dragon Mountain.
Husband, huh? Husband. They're married now.
How is Calamity doing after his surgery, VR? Can I call you VR?
No. And he's recovering quite nicely. The implants are compensating for the permanent muscle damage, and I believe that he will regain full flying capabilities with sufficient exercise and nagging.
Ah, yes, the nagging. I suspect that is the most crucial element to recovery.
Did I hear you say enhanced communication? Well, that explains it. I thought I heard Ahmed say something about the towers, spare parts from Stable 29, and a threesome.
What?
Hey, is it my fault the mayor's a perv?
Not touching that one, and you know why.
Haha. Anyway, let me just first say how joyous it is to hear your broadcast
I love
that
it.
morning 2 weeks ago. Old DJ Pony ain't never been so happy to be upstaged.
What? I didn't. You weren't even...
Whoa, just a joke. But it's no joke that your voice was a blessing in a pretty dark hour.
Oh, why, thank you. I just did what I could.
And from what I hear, you got a little quest of your own that you're meaning to take on before we all begin our little adventure.
I can imagine their faces
Why don't you tell us a
right
little
now.
bit about that?
Yes, we're going to try to save Fluttershy. Fluttershy was one of Equestria's greatest heroes, and eventually became one of the Ministry Mayors. The Mayor of the Ministry of Peace, to be specific. She was the gentlest healer and kindest soul that Equestria has ever known. Yes, she made mistakes, errors in judgment that played a role in the apocalypse. But her mistakes were born of kindness and a genuine effort to save lives. The portal to hell is open with incantations of good intentions, and what she has suffered in the last 2 centuries has been beyond the pale. The punishment has far exceeded any crime.
Ah, it's tragically a wasteland specialty. And Fluttershy sounds like a pony the equestrian wasteland really needs. What happened? And how can she be saved?
2 centuries ago, she was brutally transformed by Killing Joke. It may be possible to reverse that cruel magic and save her. For the last week, Zenith has been working on a brew, a modification of an old recipe to relieve the transformations caused by poison joke. And it's finally ready. Morning Frost has volunteered to fly us out. I don't want Calamity pulling a sky chariot until he's fully recovered. The fires of the Everfree Forest should have cleansed the area of Killing Joke, but we're not taking any unnecessary chances.
Now, Velvet, I hate to bring this up, but it has been 200 years. What is the chance that this will ever work? And even if it does, she might not survive the transformation. She might die of old age the moment she's restored.
I know, but Fluttershy deserves our efforts to try. And even in the worst case, she deserves peace. After 200 years of undeserved torment. Sorry, please, give me a moment.
Take your time.
Thank you, I'm alright.
Hey, no problem. This is understandably emotional. You were saying?
Yes. I was about to say, just in case, we've created a recording that we're going to play for her before we attempt this. The recording's from all of us. I believe your assistant Homage took part in making it, and helped Little Pip and Celestia add their voices as well. The recording lets Fluttershy know that we love her, and perhaps more importantly, that for the mistakes she's made, she is forgiven. We're going to play this for her before we try the brew, and afterwards, if we're not successful in saving her, then the recording will be integrated into a gravestone marker, set to play once a week, at sunrise for the next 10 years.
That's kinda beautiful. Of course, I really hope that isn't necessary.
Again, thank you.
No, VR, for all you've done, all you're going to do, from all of us in the Equestrian Wasteland, thank you.
She said not to call her that.
In that case, everyone deserves thanks. We all did our part. And, if I may ask, how are you doing in the wake of it all? I know that since your return you've seemed a little melancholy.
Really? Well, a lot happened. To me, to you, to Equestria. Can't go through all that and come out the same pony. But that's just life. Life always changes. And I'm afraid that's all the time we've got today, faithful listeners. Old DJ Pony's got some packing to do, and I need to program a good week or 3 of music before I go. One final announcement. Earlier, I was able to spend some time with Velvet here in my recording studio, and starting today, Velvet Remedy's Equestrian Anthem will be part of our musical rotation. Knew y'all'd enjoy hearing that. But for now, I leave you with this song, an old favorite. I dedicate this one to Strawberry Lemonade, Amber Waves, and every other pony who gave their lives at the Battle of Dragon Mountain. You stood fast, defending valiantly without even knowing what you were dying to protect.
Of course.
Only trusting that your sacrifice was for the good of Equestria. Your bravery and loyalty are unparalleled. And I promise this, you didn't die in vain. Someday, very soon as my little quest is complete, everyone will understand your sacrifice, and history will remember your names with reverence. Thanks for listening, children. This has been DJ Pony with the news.
Don't cry. Don't cry. Now, finally, one last and final video, well, recording. The afterword, guys.
Once upon a time in the magical land of Equestria, 10 years later.
Then I began thinking,
She said softly, reading the very last lines of the book. They were also the first lines, although she wasn't sure if any of her listeners had noticed. The story had come full circle. These were the moments she lived for. Just spending time with the children, seeing their eager, attentive faces as she read to them. The reading room was like an island of peace. No worries, no pressures, no pony seeking out her advice or counsel. She had never been comfortable in a position of leadership, but the ponies outside had put her on a pedestal. She hated the spotlight, and she knew she hadn't earned the trust they put in her. The reading room was one of her favorite retreats.
if I'm going to tell you about the adventure of my life, explain how I got to this place with these people, and why I did what I'm going to do next, I should probably start by explaining a little bit about Pitbox.
She gently closed the
Oh,
door.
hey, bro! What's up? Guys, before I continue, the guy who just commented is my brother. Meet J Car, everybody. Anyway, must continue because the story is almost over. I have to continue. I'm guessing this is Velvet's POV right now.
Drinking in the tranquility of the ending. Yes, these were the moments she lived for. The peace and quiet before.
What?
Whined the little apricot Pegasus sitting in the center of the other foals.
That's it? It can't end there. That's a lame way to end a story. Now, Thunder Rush,
She began. Rush was Tracker and Mist's filly, and had inherited her father's disposition.
I want action.
Thunder Rush interrupted.
And I want Rainbow Dash.
A timid yellow unicorn offered.
Well, I kind of like the ending.
You little shit.
Rush rolled her eyes at her playmate.
You would.
Well, it was tranquil while it lasted.
Now, children. It's a true story, right?
The yellow unicorn, Flower.
The afterword wasn't made by K-Cat, but she have declared it as canon. Oh, thank you. I did not know that K-Cat didn't write this portion. Okay, then. Gotta continue.
Asked. Even as she nodded in response, the filly Thunder Rush promptly disagreed.
Of course not. It's obviously just a fairy tale. Nobody could survive getting shot that much.
The filly rolled her eyes again with exaggerated exasperation.
And come on, you don't really believe there are that many monsters in Equestria, do you?
Yeah?
Oh, but there were.
She responded, hating to interrupt.
I was there.
The apricot Pegasus just crossed her forelegs and sat down with a humph. One of the colts in the back, a brown and white spotted foal, piped up.
Were you really a tree?
She took a deep breath, fortifying herself to face the question that always came after this one.
Yes, Cliff, it's true.
She heard curiosity in Flower's voice as the filly asked.
What's it like to be a tree?
And there it was. The question.
I don't want to talk about it.
Fluttershy said, the words feeling rehearsed. There were things she couldn't think about too much, and her time as a tree was high on her list of forbidden thoughts.
Now, why don't you all go out and play?
She suggested. Most of the colts and fillies didn't need to be told twice. The far doors swung open, letting in a dazzling blast of sunlight. A miniature stampede left the reading room almost vacant in seconds. She blinked, realizing that little Cliff had stayed behind. The colt galloped up to her on his tiny hooves and threw his forelegs around her. She fought back the urge to jump away and hide.
You're the best storyteller, Miss Fluttershy,
he said happily.
Thanks for the story.
Then the colt too was drawn by the pull of the midday sun and scampered off to join his friends. Fluttershy stood in place for a moment, staring out the open doors at the mission and junction town beyond. These ponies, they called themselves the followers of the apocalypse. They knew of her great mistakes, but they neither hid from the truth nor hated her for it. Instead, they embraced it as a lesson, and still, astoundingly, looked to her with a reverence she found uncomfortable. Still, if she was going to be given a position of authority, she was going to use it. She'd spent 200 years unable to do anything to help anyone. No more. She just had to do better this time. And this time, she was going to stay close to her friends so they could help her too. She spotted the followers' leader, Velvet Remedy. The charcoal-coated unicorn looked her way, smiling. She lifted a forehoof and waved. Fluttershy waved timidly back, her eyes catching on the ornate golden pitbuck encrusted with a nightingale-shaped gemstone on Velvet Remedy's foreleg. She remembered when that had been a necklace. Her necklace. She found herself smiling, happy it had found a new bearer. Although it had taken her a while to grasp the somewhat abrasive mare as a beacon of kindness. She wasn't surprised that the element had taken a new form. After all, before it was a necklace, it had been a heavy, round rock. And the book did help explain why the elements chose this new appearance. Fluttershy picked up the book in her mouth and walked over to the bookshelf. The Book of Little Pip was a good book, she thought, despite some of the darker parts that she had to skim over while reading it to the kids. The book had helped her understand things, and answered many questions. Zenith's potion had reversed the curse of the killing joke, restoring her physically to how she had been just before it touched her. But her mind... It had taken years for her to recover, and she had only been able to find herself again, to put herself back together, thanks to the constant attention and help of her friends, both her new friends and the old ones. Velvet Remedy had been right. The little statues of her friends had helped her put herself back together. Without them, she probably would have remained...
The new forms of the elements are pickbucks. Interesting. Yeah, it is. It's kind of throws me off. Like, why pickbucks? Why you couldn't go back to the amulets again? Like, seriously. But yet again, they are the elements.
Broken. Insane. Forever. The statuettes were the second set she had been given in her life. The first was from Rarity. The ones she now had were from Velvet Remedy. With them, she could weather the loss of her friends. And it felt sometimes like they were still right there with her. Sometimes, in her sleep, they would stand by her against the monsters that lurked in her head. She hadn't understood how or why Velvet Remedy had given her the Book of Little Pip. Now, thanks to the book, she knew. It was, however, rather disconcerting to know that there were still little statuettes of her out there somewhere, radiating the essence of her soul.
Like they said earlier in the story, the elements change every time they found new bearers. They are never the same. That is a good point.
The statuettes were in her saddleboxes. She took them wherever she went, taking them out only to put them on the mantel above her bed at night before she slept. With Angel. The eternally petrified form of her dearest pet and longest friend watched over her each night, guarding her. Maybe it was macabre. Maybe it was somewhat unhealthy. But she slept better with him there. He kept the nightmares away. As she slid the book back into its place on the bookshelf, she thought again that, yes, it was a good book. Deeply painful at times. But it was nice to feel like she knew Little Pip. So many of her new friends did, and despite some of her bad times, she seemed like such a nice pony. Fluttershy had tried to talk to Little Pip once, but even being in one of those tower stations made her very uncomfortable. The Single Pegasus project, she had to admit, freaked her out. Little Pip had called it peaceful, but Fluttershy had panic attacks at the mere thought of the place, of being trapped, unable to move, watching helplessly. She felt her heart racing and shoved the memory away. That place...
Like I said earlier, I liked said earlier, is it presumed that Life Bloom is the element of magic? The element of generosity through is never revealed in the story, as it was found after Little Pip was taking a rest. That is true.
This was on her list of things not to think about too much. Sometimes her mind was like a minefield. She had to be careful where she stepped. Still, she had recovered. Mostly. It had taken years, though. She smiled a little, the sort of smile you could only manage looking back on something from a great distance. Her well-intentioned friends had swiftly taken her to Spike's cave, thinking it would help her to be with someone she knew. 200 years as a tree had done nothing to dampen her phobia of dragons. Of course, she hadn't recognized him. He'd grown up. And, true, she'd seen him grown up once before, but that was an unnatural and temporary growth, not like the real thing. He looked completely different. He had wings, for one thing. "I'm sorry I scared you," she remembered Spike saying one day after she'd finally been able to do more than squeak and cow in response. It was the eye patch, wasn't it? Damn it, I was going for jaunty, but I think it just makes me look like a raider.
Oh my god.
It had not been the eye patch.
Spike is such...
If anything, the eye patch was... nice. Made him look dapper. She told him so. Fluttershy lowered her nose and nudged the book fully into place. Yes, she thought for a third time. It was a good book. Sometimes, though, she thought it had a bad title. In her mind, it was more than just the story of a single mare. It was the story of Equestria. The Equestria that had been. the equestrian wasteland that is, and the hopes for the new Equestria that was beginning to bloom.
Maybe the story should have Equestria in its name,
she asked herself. More than that, it was the story of the birth of the fledgling forces of good in the equestrian wasteland. The new Canterlot Republic, the Applejacks Rangers, even the followers of the Apocalypse had their origin.
I said I'd scream when if they said it. If they said New Canterlot Republic, I'd scream. I'm gonna do it again.
In this story. And she couldn't forget the Twilight Society, whose megaspell had turned them into a superpower in the wasteland. They were good and helpful ponies too.
Jeremy, you weren't in the last
Mostly.
episode, so you don't understand why I'm screaming. You weren't in the last episode.
Usually. Fluttershy crossed the reading room and stepped
Hi,
out into the
Aurora!
fierce sunlight that poured down on Junction Town.
My screams are terrifying. Fair enough.
She blinked, adjusting to the brightness as she felt the warmth of the sun penetrate her feathers and coat. Ahead and to the left, Velvet Remedy was talking to some of the medical ponies near the clinic. To her right, the laughter of the playing children tickled the air. Straight ahead, at the far wall of the mission, she spotted Pallet and her apprentice Silverbell. The older mare was guiding the adolescent unicorn as she used her magic to put the finishing touches on a stained glass window. Fluttershy guessed the window was for the new Canterlot Castle. She closed her eyes, drawing in a deep breath. The scents of dust and lavender trees mixed with a hint of rosewood and cinnamon from Brandy's cookhouse.
Ooh, smell that air.
She said softly to her friends in her saddleboxes. It was the smell of everything being good in the world. She turned to watch the children. Thunderrush's little brother was pestering the apricot Pegasus. She tilted her ears to catch the conversation.
I can name all the presidents of the new Canterlot's Republic,
the little one boasted, so cute he made Fluttershy snicker.
Pfft, that's easy.
Rush said, blowing her sibling off.
There's only been 2. Try something harder.
The tiny colt tried again.
I can name all the princesses of old Equestria. Equally easy isn't harder.
Fluttershy sighed, shaking her head, and took a step. She eeped as a young voice cried out,
Hey, Fluttershy.
Turning, she saw the pink alicorn filly fly up unsteadily, her face wide and smiling.
Oh, hello, Surprise.
Fluttershy greeted her. Surprise was the third alicorn to be successfully birthed, and the first alicorn to have a coat that wasn't blue, green, or purple.
Look what I can do.
The alicorn filly beamed happily. Her little face scrunched up in concentration. Her horn flickered and began to glow, small sparks erupting from its tip. A blob of magical energy formed above the little alicorn. It melted down around her, forming a magical shield. The fragile magical sphere lasted only a moment before popping like a soap bubble, but the alicorn's eyes looked up with glee.
Oh, that's very good, Surprise.
Fluttershy cooed.
Getting ever so much better. Your parents must be so proud.
Still, she couldn't help but suppress an involuntary shudder, her eyes drifting towards the mountains, and towards Glyphmark. She knew better than to worry. Zenith, of all zebras, wouldn't allow them to be anything but extra cautious. Still, the brew they created to turn alicorns male, the potion that allowed them to breed, required extract of killing joke as an ingredient, and that meant that the angels were cultivating it over there. No. Stop thinking about things on the list. You know it's not healthy. Surprise squeaked in delight and fluttered away, seeking another adult to show off to. Fluttershy slowly walked down the cobblestone street that wove through the mission. She passed Brandy trotting the other way, pulling a cart of vegetables from the gardens. She exchanged greetings with the young cook, feeling fleetingly disappointed that she wouldn't get to taste the soup and salad being prepared for tonight's dinner. But she wasn't going to be here. The equestrian wasteland was producing enough food now for its population to begin to prosper, ponies and non-ponies alike. 3 years ago, Little Pip had cleared the last of the cloud curtain. her continued habitation of the Celestia hub being as much out of dedication to a promise as it was for psychological and physiological concerns. The former she empathized with all too well. The latter regarded the small mare's development of a constitutional weakness, her multiple exposures to the pink cloud and broadcasters having taken their toll. Plus, while not constantly minded, the weather still needed to be regulated so that the farms could run at maximum production. And, sadly, it would probably be generations before the rest of Equestria was willing to trust the weather to the Pegasi once again. Yes, food was no longer a necessity that ponies needed to struggle and bleed for. The new Canterlot Republic ensured that the bounty was distributed generously to all, and the Talons kept the farms and caravans safe from gangs and other marauders who would attempt to seize control. Rather, the national concern had once again turned to power. The Gardens of Equestria had given back their farmlands, but had stripped them of the radioactive materials necessary to run Red Eye's engines. For now, most of the energy used by the NCR was generated from devices drawing on star batteries, a donation from Calamity, she had been told. But these resources were finite and heavily strained. The needs of the nation would soon far exceed the limited power they could produce. Fluttershy cringed at the notion that Equestria's power might soon become dependent on irradiated rocks and other materials that could only be found in foreign lands. She'd seen the land she loved go down that road before. It did not end well. Getting Aqua Cura was bad enough. Several field mice scampered across the street. Fluttershy flapped her wings, lifting her hooves off the cobblestones and giving them space to pass. An iridescent bird of golden and emerald plumage shot down out of the sky, snatching one of them up. The balefire phoenix shot into the air, lifting up 10 yards and dropped her prey onto the stones below, the fall breaking the little mouse's back.
Hello, Pyrelight?
Fluttershy squeaked, as Pyrelight dropped onto her prey and started to eat. For a moment, she had almost called the balefire phoenix Philomena. But Pyrelight wasn't the same bird as the one that had been Celestia's pet. At least she was pretty sure they weren't the same bird. But the similarities were striking enough that Fluttershy was sure they were related somehow. Cousins, perhaps. Maybe even sisters. Pyrelight looked up at Fluttershy, mouse intestines dangling from her beak, and squawked pleasantly. Fluttershy bit back the urge to grimace, smiling approvingly at the predator instead. She had been with Velvet Remedy through Pyrelight's last 2 natural renewal cycles, the first time helping the unicorn accept the seemingly horrible decline of her pet's health. Fluttershy flew past, landing a few yards ahead and continuing on her way. Ahead, she noticed that Pallet and Silverbell had paused their work to watch Surprise show them her shield bubble. A chime sounded, crystalline and clear, ringing across the mission. She perked up, looking to the sky above the gate. Other ponies trotted about her, heading to sea. Silverbell galloped past her, her mentor trotting more leisurely behind, Velvet Remedy joining by their side. Surprise followed the promise that there were more adults to show off to. One of the caravans was home. Even before she recognized the silhouette, the glints of metal under his wing and on his foreleg told Fluttershy that it was Calamity who had just come home. It was good to see him again, and not just because he was going to be her ride this afternoon. She'd always been a weak flyer, even in her youth, and she wasn't young anymore. The only pink in her mane now was from streaks Silverbell had put into it while practicing some cosmetic spells. Fluttershy felt confident in flying across Junction Town, maybe even to where they were building the new castle, but not all the way to Buckling Cross. The heavy gate door squealed, pulled open by ponies on pedal machines made from old griffin chasers. As Calamity landed inside, the caravan he guarded began through the doors. She trotted forward, her eyes moving to each pony, counting manes. She breathed a small sigh of relief she didn't realize she was holding, as every pony was accounted for. She supposed she'd been a little worried. The trip to Thunderfall City and back wasn't as dangerous as it used to be, but it was good to see them back in one piece.
Oh, Silverbell pouted. I was hoping it'd be Mom and Dad.
Ditzy-Doo's caravan was due back today as well, she realized, and from a much more treacherous journey. It was for the ghouls of Equestria. Their bodies could not heal without radiation, and after the Gardens of Equestria had been activated, there was no radiation in Equestria anymore. Every week, Brave caravans like Ditzy-Doos were making the trek beyond Equestria's borders to the rad pits and the blighted neighboring lands, filling barrels with the irradiated water that ghouls at home needed to survive. Ditzy-Doo was, however, the only one to have decided to brand her water deliveries. Absolutely everything was Equestria's source for Aquacura, free on request with any size of purchase, no matter how small. The dirty water caravans were all too often targets of bandits and other awful ponies. She understood Silverbell's anxiety. The caravan was already crowded by ponies when she reached it. Some were helping unload. More were just eager to hear about.
I heard Mom and Dad. Did Ditzy actually go with the Bat Pony Ghoul, Lionheart?
About the trip. On our way there, we ran into raiders out near Hope. Calamity was telling Velvet Remedy, shaking his head sadly. They hit the outpost there. There weren't much left of it when we reached it.
Raiders?
Velvet gasped.
But we haven't seen those in years. Are you sure it wasn't one of the gangs?
Dang it, Wason.
Gangs don't do to ponies what these monsters did. Calamity snorted, drawing down his silver cow pony hat. But don't worry, they won't be doing nothing to no pony ever again. Fluttershy watched as the two merry ponies began to sketch out plans to send a group out to properly tend to the dead at Hope Outpost. I'm off with Shy to Buckling Cross this evening. Might want to get some of the Talon boys to provide cover, Calamity suggested finally. I got 'em all, I'm sure of it. But better play it safe, just in case. The rust-coated cyber pony turned to her. I'll be ready to go in an hour, if and y'all are ready.
Oh, yes, thank you, if that's okay with you.
She paused, then asked,
Do you think it'll be dangerous?
Well, shucks no. Calamity smiled. We'll likely get a few rogue wins, but the junction town to Buckling Cross is one of the safest routes into all Equestria. Well, now that Bloodwing mating season had passed, at least.
Rogue wins?
Yep. It's Hommage's birthday, so she's up in the Celestia Hub with little Pip, Calamity informed her. I hear they're spending the whole day in the autumn vestibule.
Oh, how romantic,
Fluttershy squeaked. Calamity turned to his wife with a smirk. Homage wanted me to remind you that this is the last birthday she's got before she's officially old and decrepit. He playfully poked Velvet Remedy with a hoof as she scowled and pouted. Fluttershy's eyes were drawn to the golden pip-buck on his foreleg, the two jewels embedded in it taking the shapes of a hammer and a screwdriver.
What's decrepit?
Surprise piped up, looking to the adults curiously.
Of course, it would turn into the cutie mark on his flank that no longer exists. You know, I wouldn't mind if it stayed like the lightning bolt, to be honest, because he is a Dashite, and it would kind of honor the Dashites in a way.
In this case,
Pallet answered, lowering her head to mock whisper to the little pink alicorn.
It means the same age Velvet was when she left our stable.
Velvet Remedy tossed her mane back and nickered indignantly. Dusk was settling over Equestria. The dipping sun glowed between the skeletal monuments of Manhattan's ruined skyscrapers. Dingy light and fading shadows stretched across Fetlock. The wind sent ripples across the lake and through the lush hills of grass. She stood in the back of the sky chariot, staring down as Fetlock passed below. She could see the lights of the settlement built around the Applejack Ranger's stronghold, a bastion of life in a sea of wreckage.
Did you see Ponyville?
She asked suddenly. Yep, Calamity answered as he flew, pulling the chariot behind him. They seem to be doing all right, for hellhounds. Not even raiders are stupid enough to want any of Ponyville now. 10 years ago, a megaspell destroyed the hellhound's home in Splendid Valley. A few dozen of the survivors had surfaced in the ruins of the town that had once been her home. The home of her friends. Now, it was home to maybe a score of hellhound families. As Calamity guided the sky chariot towards the hills, Fluttershy knew where they were going. Part of her mind insisted on envisioning this place as it once was. She and her friends had once gone golfing in these very hills, back before the war was even a whisper.
Golfing?
She remembered Angel had gotten bored and started gnawing on the canopy of their golf cart until she cajoled him to stop. But this place wasn't a golf course anymore.
Golf course?
Calamity brought the sky chariot down to the wind-stroked grass and unhitched himself. Fluttershy spread her wings, dipping her head to pick up the bundles of flowers that had accompanied her for this much of the journey. The two Pegasi approached the 5 tombstones. Fluttershy dropped the flowers at her hooves, letting Calamity pick up several of them to place them at the gravestone of Elder Steelhoof's Applesnack. She scooped up the others, and began reverently placing them at each of the other 4 graves, which fanned out behind that first one, as Calamity took a few minutes of quiet with his departed friend.
I know she might have met him.
A soft pang filled her heart, as Fluttershy wished she had the time to know Applesnack better. She stopped at the gravestone nearest Applesnack's, reading the inscription. Here rests Paladin Strawberry Lemonade. Brave, loyal, true. She gave her life that Equestria may blossom once again. The other 3 markers had similar epitaphs. The wind began to pick up, tugging at her silvered mane with its streaks of pink. She planted the last of the flowers, and turned back to Calamity. The stallion was staring upwards and towards the east. She followed his gaze, spotting the gaunt flying forms of 2 ghoul Pegasi pulling a water cart, leading the other wagons as the caravan flew towards Junction Town.
Don't tell me.
She knew one of those lead ghouls would have a golden pipbuck on her foreleg, with 7 diamonds arranged like bubbles. Ditzy-Doo, the bearer of laughter. Who ever could have imagined? It warmed her heart that her old friend had found love in the equestrian wasteland. If any pony in Equestria deserved happiness, Fluttershy thought, it was her. As she watched them pass, she believed she saw the pale stallion beside Ditzy-Doo glance at his love, the Canterlot ghoul's normal grimace fading into a look of silent adoration. He caught her, his little falling star. A strange thought crossed her mind as she mused that Ditzy-Doo and Lionheart reminded her, just a little, of Applejack and Applesnack. As if reading her thoughts, a very disturbing notion, Calamity stepped next to her, expressing, I ain't normally the religious type, but I've seen enough to know that souls exist. So part of me likes to think that, somewhere up there, Steelhoofs and his gal is smiling down on those 2. Fluttershy nodded silently. The winds continued to blow, making the trees creak and the water of the lake lap at the shore.
Crying. No, I'm not crying. I'm not crying.
Sunset poured out its beautiful palette across Equestria, painting the sky in oranges and purples, blues and golds. Sunlight glinted off the broken windows of the dead Manhattan skyscrapers, looking like a scattering of jewels, and shimmered on the river that flowed around Buckling Cross. The butter-yellow Pegasus stretched her wings, standing on the edge of that fortress, her eyes looking out across the river, watching the slowly gliding boats, then lifting beyond. She could see Gummy's home from here. Like Ditzy-Doo, another strand of the past that persisted in the present, tugging at her heart. Painful, but still precious, like anchors that kept her form from blowing away in the wind. She glanced downward, seeing the black scar of the Arbu prison. Calamity was down there somewhere, visiting a pony he described as an old friend who looks a lot like me. It saddened her that there was still a need for such places in Equestria. But not all ponies in the wasteland were willing to embrace their better virtues to be good ponies. Every pony, she believed, had goodness inside of them. But she had learned the hardest possible way that you couldn't assume ponies would do the right thing, which made those who did all the more precious and wonderful. She felt the presence of the hellhound as he came up behind her. The old cyberhound crouched down next to her, his cyberleg giving a metallic whine. At last, the aging albino spoke. You think you're ready for this? Fluttershy nodded. She would not allow the new age of Equestria to be born out of genocide. The hellhounds were on the precipice of extinction, and it was largely the fault of ponies. Wanted or not, warranted or not, she had been once again put in a position where her words carried weight. And, as much as she hated being looked to as a leader, she wasn't going to shy away. Not after everything. This was something she must do. She must,
She must.
The Applejack's Rangers weren't going to be happy about it, but she would convince them. The Hellhound Sanctuary was the right thing to do. The elderly albino hellhound got back up as she turned around, and followed her as she marched towards the council hall. A stiff wind cut through her feathers, chilling her. The sun began to sink beneath the waves. Fluttershy took a deep breath. The day was almost over. It had been a day without gunshots. A peaceful day. A better day. In a world filled with misery and uncertainty, it is a great comfort to know that, in the end, there is always a light in the darkness.
And that's it. That's it. Now what? That's the end of K-Cat's Fallout Equestria, guys. You know, I always wondered when this moment would happen. I didn't know what would happen when it did. Conclusion? I don't know. I don't know what to think. I guess I'm kind of sad that little Pip never gets to experience love. Like, well, she did experience love, but she never gets to live a long life of love like that. She doesn't get to experience living with that loved one. She does get to talk to Homage, but they don't get to be together. They can only talk. And Fluttershy being back, meaning she's the only living remnant of the old world, of all the Ministry Mares, that is, I mean. The creator of the Balefire bombs. Sorry, the Mega Spells. The creator of the Mega Spells, not Balefire bombs. Yeah, she is the hero. I think it's selfish of me to ask for her to have a good ending. A happy ending. Anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this series as much as I did. There was a long roller coaster of emotions going through it all, and now it's concluded. The story is always going to go to my heart. It will. Yeah, I listened to that part. I know on Homage's birthday she does visit little Pip. Like physically, because I didn't think she actually physically visited. I thought it was more of a, over the radio talk thing. Anyway, you guys, I'll let you all know. I want to let all of you guys know who watch this series that I love you all. Let me get a picture. Okay. I want to let all of you guys know, though, I love you all, and I loved how you all guys stuck with me through the series, from beginning to end, and I cannot wait to start the next one. Now, hold on. Here we go. Give me a second here. Copy. I'm gonna try to show this image, so hold on. Here we go. Hope I did this right. No, I did not. Right. Copy. Paste. And here we go. Wait, what am I looking at here? I'm looking at something entirely different. After decaying plutonium, we scrape from the hillside. Why? Prior to discovery, this webpage, assuming it exists, does not exist, but your attempt to access this page has forced its position to collapse. Schrodinger's pony, huh? Hold on, the image you didn't give me wasn't showing up. No, it popped up saying that it no longer existed, or something like that. I don't know what it's supposed to be. Here, okay, share this one. Here we go. Copy. Paste. I really want to see this image. I always admire these. And here we go. Oh, they do physically visit. Oh. Shit, hold on. I do physically visit. And it's interesting. So they do physically visit. But at least that gives me some satisfaction. That gives me some satisfaction. Well, anyway, I think that I should conclude this now, because I see what you did there. Holy crap, I have more tabs on here than I thought I did. Hold on. Well, either way. Hold on, let me get back to normalcy for a moment. Well, anyway, guys, I think it's time to conclude this. Anyway, guys, I'll catch you guys in the next video. And guys, just remember, I do many other videos besides Fallout games and all that stuff, and I hope you guys join me in those. And I hope to see all of you in the next video. Stay nerdy, my friends. Bye!